My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of Barry Season 3, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch my review because I will be going in depth. Now, one of my favorite TV shows ever is BoJack Horseman. That show is just so fantastic, but what I loved about it is the fact that it starts off as a typical comedy, but as the show progresses, it becomes darker and darker and darker. And the last two seasons of that show are just hard to take in. It's a very tough watch. And Barry is giving me similar vibes here. It starts off as a comedy, but it gets darker and darker, and this is easily the darkest season yet. There's still moments of humor, but they're just hidden under all the darker undertones. And I love it because it shows that this show is progressing. Now, let's begin talking about the cast, first with Bill Hader, and I think it has to go mentioned that Bill Hader, up until this point, has mainly been in comedies, and he's just on a whole other level here. This is his best performance yet. He is just so fantastic as this character, and his delivery in certain moments is absolutely pitch perfect, and the way this character is written is just fascinating. They're testing to see how far can this character go before you stop defending him. It reminds me of BoJack Horseman Season 6. Well, if you're still defending BoJack at that point, the show is legitimately screaming at you to stop it. And that's what I feel like they were doing with this character here. Stop making excuses for him. He's not a good guy who does some bad things. This is a terrible person who deserves no forgiveness, who deserves no second chances, and it really hits you while watching it. And just the way he looks this entire season, he just looks miserable, he looks more hardened, and he just is very unnerving. Whenever he talks to someone, you can just see that there's something off about him, there's something wrong. Now, I do wish we do see a bit more of the transition from the end of Season 2 Barry to Season 3 Barry, but just the way the character is written and what Bill Hader brings to him is just pitch perfect. And when he does shout at Sally, you just hate him. You just see that he is this monster. And it actually made me feel bad for Sally, who I don't really like as a person, but I think she's an incredibly well-written character. And Sarah Goldberg is once again fantastic here. This is her best performance of the show so far. And at first I was worried about her plot because it seemed separate from everything else, but by the end everything came together so perfectly. And I just love how as this season progresses, she becomes more and more unlikable as well. She kind of becomes a version of what we've heard that Gene Kuzner was in the past, and I think it really fits into the bigger ideas of this season. And I also love the fact that the show finally gives her a chance to defend herself, and the end result is that it completely traumatized her. It shook her to her core, and she'll never be okay again. Back in Barry Season 1, when she's teaching Barry how to act, she's grabbing him by the head in the close. And we see that same image mirrored here after she kills a guy and Barry's trying to help her be better. And I love just the symmetry there. It's so perfectly captured. And I think their relationship is so well written. It's absolutely compelling. It begins and we can just see that Barry is just trying to lift her up and that's all he's doing. But he's clearly just a lazy bum with no ambition in life. And how he becomes a bigger and bigger monster until he does freak out at her. And as a result, Sally goes in complete denial and she overcompensates. And you can just see that she's afraid and that she's doing everything she can to be on his good side. So when they do eventually break up, you're glad. It's a good thing. And then you see how Barry tells the story of why they broke up to everyone and how he changes all these details to make himself seem not as bad as he really is. And then it also explores the fact that he keeps everything bottled up and he doesn't open himself up to people. So he's trying to do that. And he does it with Sally at a certain point. And it is just one of the most uncomfortable, unnerving scenes I've seen in quite some time. And then by the end of this season, she begins to kind of like this monster who Barry is, and she wants to use that to her advantage. So, despite how bad these two are for each other, I think the relationship is really compelling. And then you've got Henry Winkler, who's also fantastic. It kind of reminds me of Last of Us 2, because as we see Abby's redemption, we also see Ellie's fall. And you kind of get that with Sally and Gene. That as Sally's becoming unlikable and a terrible person, Gene Kuzno is working on redeeming himself and trying to earn forgiveness. And I think that's really well done. I loved seeing his redemption story and how Barry just gives him some new opportunities and how he uses that to make things right. But the fact that he takes down Barry in the way he does is very satisfying but devastating at the same time. So I think Henry Winkler is just fantastic this entire season, but especially in that last scene. Just top-notch work, really well-written character. And then you've got Anthony Kerrigan as NoHo Hank, and he's still great. There's so many scenes where he cracks me up. That said, though, I didn't care for his plot this season. I feel like they're trying to find a way to keep him relevant in this show, and they're struggling, but they know they have comedy gold with him, and it just feels so separate from everything else. And then you've got Michael Orby, who's still great here, but once again, his plot with Hank just feels really irrelevant to the story at play. Stephen Root, he's once again good here, but I feel like he's not given much to do. His story feels completely irrelevant. I know you can make arguments that, oh, he got everyone to go up against Barry, but it doesn't get leaned into nearly enough. And then you've got Darcy Carden, who I haven't mentioned in any of my other season reviews because she's just been kind of in the background. But I do think she's great in this season, and I like how by the end of this season, you can see that she's becoming like how Sally was. And it just kind of highlights the fact that it's a cycle. Then you've got Robert Wisdom, who is great in this season. He's not in it a ton, but whenever he's on screen, he demands your attention. It's a very commanding performance. Then you've got James Heliarchy Leo, who I think is good here, but he's not given Odd too much to do, and he doesn't really seem relevant. And then you've got Elsie Fisher, who's only in the first half of this season, and it seems like she's going to have a big role this season. And then she just disappears, and I found that to be very odd. She tells Sally that Barry's bad for her, and then just leaves, and that's it. It seemed very off. I didn't like the way the character was handled. And then in episode 6, there's this one guy. I think he's a barista, and I was looking to the cast, and I think the guy's name is Chris Harrison. Maybe it's someone else, but basically this guy in this one episode cracked me up. Really funny performance. So the entire cast does a fantastic job. It takes these characters to darker places than we've ever seen them hit before, and it makes for a compelling, unnerving, uncomfortable watch, which is really fantastic. And I love the bigger themes that this show's trying to tackle here. This season is about second chances and whether people deserve them or not, and if people can ever redeem themselves, or are people doomed to the same cycle. Who does earn forgiveness, and why do they earn forgiveness? Can people ever escape the past? And I love how this show doesn't give you any answers to that. It's all on display, and it's up to you to interpret it however fits your needs. And I just think it's tackled incredibly well. And I also love the fact that it shows how the Hollywood business can bring out the worst in people. And the satire aspects of that, just like in season 2, I think were really funny and I think pretty accurate. There was a Sally streaming show, and after one day of not doing as good as it could have, it gets cancelled, and I feel like that's kind of relevant for today's. I hate what Hollywood is doing now with streaming and everything, and I think it's completely diluting and ruining the industry even more so, and that's a whole other thing. So I like seeing that on display here, and as dark and as tough of a watch as this season is, it's still really funny moments. Some moments that stood out to me is there's this one scene where this couple is breaking up, and we see Gene Kuzno in the backyard, in the background, and he starts getting chased by all these dogs, and they're just like, why would you want to break up with me? "You have too many dogs." I'm not describing it well, but it is really funny. There's one scene where Barry's trying to blow up a place and he's calling this app that will help him detonate the bomb. That was really funny. There's one scene where this guy's FaceTiming and he sees that their place is getting raided, and I thought that was really funny. And I didn't mention this in my season 1 review, and I wish I did, but it cracks me up just how stupid the cops are in this show. It was funny in season 1 where they couldn't figure out the real story and they came up with this convoluted plot instead. And it cracked me up here with everything regarding Fawkes being the Raven and all that. I thought that stuff was really funny. And this show is incredibly well directed. Now, I think it's Bill Hader who directs some episodes and Alec Borg, I believe. I could be incorrect there, but I do think this show is really well directed. As dark as it is, it balances it out with humor perfectly, but it doesn't undercut the dramatic tension that's on display. They allow the character moments to shine, and there's one moment that was absolutely everywhere after it aired, and I finally saw the moment, and it's as good as I've heard. It's this motorcycle chase, and it's not the most exciting chase in the world, but just the way it's shot and directed and the use of sound really allowed it to stay with me. Like as he's driving past all the vehicles and you can hear all the different radio stations and music and all that, that was really fantastic stuff. And the way this season ends, I absolutely loved. I found it to be a very satisfying ending. In fact, if this was the series finale, I think it would have been a perfect ending to this show. Now, the show does have a season 4 coming, and I'm a bit worried about where they're going to take this show and how they can keep it going, but just looking at it as the end of season 3, just perfect. Barry finally got what was coming to him, and it's satisfying that it's still tragic in its own way. Gene Cousineau, what he had to do, I thought that was really satisfying. And Sally, as she leaves the town and goes back to her hometown, I thought that was satisfying too. To be honest, I couldn't be happier with this ending. But that said, I do have some issues, and most of this stuff I've already mentioned because I don't think the Hank and Cristobal story was needed at all. Anytime it shows up, I'm just like, okay, this is funny, it's entertaining, but it didn't add much. I think they were using it to add some levity to it, but it didn't really work for me in that way. And there's one moment where Hank is locked up and he can hear this animal attacking this other guy, and it's meant to be this really tense scene, but it just felt very goofy to me and it didn't work that way. Then once again, Fawkes has nothing to do this season. And then you also got Albert Nugent, who doesn't add too much to the season at all. So those 3 subplots didn't really go anywhere for me. There is one episode where Barry's hallucinating, and unless it's BoJack Horseman, I'm not the biggest fan of hallucinations. It's just something that's so overdone and whatever, but it's not done too much, so it doesn't bother me too much. And then also, as much as I love this season, I didn't like the first episode, because the ending of season 2 has you excited to see what's going to happen between Cousineau and Barry. And I thought the actual moment where they faced each other was very underwhelming. It just left me feeling, that's it. But all my issues aside, this is my favorite season of Barry yet, and that's saying a lot. It is the most ambitious and darkest season, and it's all the better for it. I love the way the story progresses, and I love the dark places they took these characters. Every performance is fantastic. I love how it's able to balance out the dark, unnerving, uncomfortable story with some moments of levity, some moments that make you laugh. It's very well directed. Got some minor issues, but this is a damn good season of television, so I'm going to go ahead and give Barry Season 3 a 7.5 out of 10. And one thing I forgot to mention is that I watched this entire season in one day, and it's just so nice that this show is still half-hour long episodes. Usually shows start off with half-hour long episodes, then they get longer as the show progresses, but this show is staying consistent, and in a day and age where every show is too long, I appreciate that. But have you seen Barry Season 3? Did you think it was very good as well? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.